So if you can see yourself in either of these opportunities or roles, then if you can identify it and have this conversation with your spouse, it makes the expectations, it makes the role, if you can name it and be like, hey, we are the cheerleader or we're the co-captain, like it gives it a lot more context, and then you have a better understanding. You can have this conversation with your spouse. So I would encourage you too, if you are similar in one of these two positions, to have this conversation with your spouse. Share this episode with them, have them, listen to this with you, and really get clarity on how are we supporting each other, how are we encouraging each other, how are we pushing towards our financial and our family goals. Welcome back to The Donkey
and the Bee,
where men are jackasses
and women are biatches,
where we work together to build an extraordinary life.
Tune in to up your game in your marriage, entrepreneurship, and finances. Welcome back to another episode of The Donkey and the Bee with Brett and Laura Shotkavis. We got the donkey right here. We got Brett, and then we got the bee, which is me. So we got a jackass and a biatch, and that's why we're called The Donkey and the Bee. I know a lot of people ask that question, so that's where we got that. And we are talking all things marriage, entrepreneurship, and finances, how a donkey and a bee can come together and have some failures, have some successes, and live life to the fullest.
Yes, ma'am, we are. So today we're talking about how to make money and how you can structure this with some roles, some expectations between spouses. Because there's not one way to do it. So I want to actually unpack a couple different ways that we have gone through in our journey in our marriage to give us, here's the best approach for us to maximize our income, to make more money, but also really to have a family balance in there as well.
I do think this is something that a lot of people talk about. It's kind of an underlying theme that kind of gets shoved under the rug when it comes to quote unquote roles within a relationship. And so I'm excited to talk about this today because there's a lot of things that we talk about that we're open and honest about as far as roles and responsibilities. But I think that sometimes, newlyweds or maybe even people that have been married for 20, 30 years have not talked about this with their spouse. So I think it's an important thing to discuss with your significant other so that you're on the same page.
For sure. So I want to use an analogy today and say that there is the cheerleader and then there is the co-captain, right? So if we're talking football, right, you perhaps have the quarterback, right, the star of the team who's leading the charge, trying to win the game, and you have the cheerleader on the sideline cheering them on, right, supporting that quarterback. Or on the opposite side, you have your offense and your defense, right? Your quarterback, he is your captain on the offensive side. You have another captain on your defensive side, right? And they are working together to win the same game, but on opposite sides of the team. And they both have the same objective, right? So I think you can structure your relationship with either of these options, where one is really doing the majority of it and the other person is supporting them, or you have divvied up the roles and say, hey, we are hitting this together and we have separate roles and responsibilities.
I think it's very important to note that the visual you just played out, they were on the same team. They weren't on different teams, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So just wanted to say that a lot of times when you're in a marriage, I think sometimes subconsciously you're on different teams and you don't even realize you're on different teams. You're playing for different teams. One is the Eagles, one is the Bucks, whatever you want to say. And I think that a lot of times marriages, they sabotage themselves because they think they're together. They think that they're working together, but they're actually working together against each other.
Yeah.
So I wanted to point that out, that we're talking about a marriage that's on the same team, not opposite teams.
Right. For sure. So let's start with the cheerleader analogy, and we can unpack that. And then I think what you mentioned is important, so we can kind of talk through that in context about potentially the self-sabotage and the sly remarks that pull the other spouse down. Mm-hmm. So I think of it in this way, and let's frame this first in talking about finances. How do you excel financially in your job, in your business, to make more money? And ultimately, I think you need the captain, right? On this analogy, you have the quarterback who's pushing hard, he's leading his team, he's leading his business, or her, right? Whichever one you want to say. This person, this quarterback, leading the charge, making more money, growing, hustling, putting above 40 hours a week, right? That's what context we're talking about. Two people who are overachievers that are growing their business, growing in their career, and trying to increase income. You have that person who's legitimately putting in not a balanced amount of time, right? At least in our current culture where people say, hey, I want to work 40 hours a week and I'm really only working 20 and I'm Netflixing and I'm, watching social media all day. Like, I don't relate to those people. I want to work. I work very hard and very long because I really enjoy what I do. So I'm speaking to that type of person who is very, very driven, who is trying to hit certain financial goals, right? This person is going to be out of balance with the quote, normal lazy culture that we're in. So you have the cheerleader, right? On the sideline. They're not necessarily on the field, but they cannot be there pulling them off the field, being like, babe, it's 5 o'clock. Like, you've been working all of 41 hours this week. Get your butt home, right? They need to be like, no, honey, you stay out there. This is OT. Get on the field, make the play, run that ball into the end zone, right? Like, I don't care if you're working more than 40 hours a week, right? This is the cheerleader saying, like, I want you to succeed. I want you to win, because when you win, we win. Our family wins. We have these certain financial goals, and we know that this is a certain season of life where this season of life, we are hustling. We are putting the hard work, right? So that we can get to this certain place. We can get to financial freedom. We can get to early retirement. We can grow our business. We can sell our business, whatever it is. But the cheerleader is there supporting that quarterback. They are there taking care of whatever those behind the scenes needs are. And I would kind of put it into two categories here. They are supporting you in the business, if you have your own business, or they are supporting you in, maybe you have a career, but they are supporting you in that way so that you can put in this extra time and energy. They are not self-sabotaging you. And then additionally, if you're the cheerleader, and let's just say that you maybe don't have a job, you are taking care of the family, or you do have a job, but it's not one of those jobs where you're like crushing it. You are maintaining all of your income is like saving or fund money or something like that. And your role is the family, right? That you are doing that. And then again, it goes back to this idea that you are not doing those little sly comments like, why aren't you home in time, honey? Like, why aren't you taking out the trash? You are really therefore the quarterback on the home front, right? It's opposite roles, but you are now the quarterback, and perhaps the other spouse who is working is the cheerleader for you on that, saying, hey babe, let me help you with the kids, right? Like, you're taking the majority of this, but you know what? I know you hate making those lunches. Let me step up and do that. I am not spending that disproportionate amount of time with the family, but here are the small things that I can do to support you, because you are now the quarterback on our family time, on this at home relationship.
I think that's the best example of what we're talking about is, one person might be the businessman or the businesswoman. It doesn't necessarily have to be the man. There are stay-at-home dads as well. But I think it usually is one person is out in the workforce or working on their own business, and then one person is at home, taking care of the home front. And I think that's the perfect example kind of in our culture for right now. And so I love that you said that those roles also switch with being, the quarterback versus the cheerleader if it's the home front. And I think that this is where there can be a lot of conflict, where you can be on the opposite team, are the sly remarks. And I see this all the time in marriages where, we're hanging out with some people and, there's sly remarks all the time about, my wife doesn't do this, or my wife doesn't do that, or my husband doesn't do this, my husband doesn't do that. And I feel like when you say things like that, like, you're literally working against each other. It's not building each other up. And so I think one thing that we do, and I think we do pretty well, is putting your spouse first. And so if there's one little thing you can do to help that person in their role to, maybe make their day easier or whatever it can be, it's something small. Like you said, lunches. If you're a stay-at-home mom and you want to help your husband, maybe maybe get his car washed or something. Your husband, what's important to you, or your spouse, what's important to them. Doing something small, it doesn't have to be every day, but if it's like, once or twice a week, doing something small out of the ordinary to help them in their role, I think will also make them feel, oh, well, then I need to do something out of the ordinary for my spouse to help them in their role. And it's just kind of this like ongoing cycle of putting each other first and helping and cheerleading that person within their role.
Yeah. And so you talk about these little action steps, but I think really maybe even more important to that is the encouragement and the support that goes along with it. It's a lot of the verbal stuff. It's a lot of the, I appreciate what you're doing, the time you're putting in on both sides. When the person who's working extra and the person who is supporting the family, that appreciation and support and encouragement has to go both ways. And honestly, I think that is the underlying theme here towards how to succeed in this, is the appreciation and the support and the motivation towards your spouse to keep going, babe. Like that's what a cheerleader is, right? They're not necessarily taking action steps. They are encouraging, they are supporting you. And a lot of it can be emotional and mental because you get beat up, right? Like if you're out in the workforce, like nothing is easy. It gets really hard. And for sure, if you are at home with the kids, that is
even harder.
So frustrating, right? You're taking care of the kids, shuttling them around, doing all that kind of crap. Like, oh my gosh, like I got to get around some adults. That is hard. And really, I think both roles here need to be a cheerleader for the other role.
So one word that comes to mind when you just said all that was respect. I think that both sides need to have respect for each other and respect for that role. And I think the easiest way for me to do this is to put myself in the other person's shoes and be respectful of the role that they are in and that they are crushing, right? Like, so be respectful, right? Don't say those slight comments. Put, your spouse first. Help them in the little things. And in that's showing respect for your spouse. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think a lot of men, they want that respect from their wife. I think that's one of the most important things for a man, to feel that respect. I think it's a little different for women. I think it's more of like a love emotional thing. But I think that women also want the respect too. Like, hey, I'm here at home with the kids. And yes, you may think it's fun and we go to the park and we just, frolic and have picnics all day. But like majority of the time, it is not that. It is temper tantrums. It is, messes in the kitchen. It's constant laundry. It's all these things. And so I think it's having that respect for that role that's super important.
Yeah, I think you nailed it right there. Respect for your spouse, but also respect for that role. And it's not the attitude towards, well, you know what, I'm making the money. I know you're working hard over here, honey, but your role is really not as important as mine. Because it is just as important, right? Your family success is equally, if not more important than your financial success, right? You can be a stinking billionaire and have your family fall apart. And at least in my opinion, I think you failed, right? Like if you have not succeeded in your family life and in business, then what's the point?
Yeah.
Right? Like I don't want to be that huge, successful financial person that has had 3 marriages and I got like kids with all these different baby mamas. You're a failure in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I think this is where we started. When we opened our first company, it was a house flipping company in California. We were this cheerleader quarterback role. I was the quarterback. I did not all of it, but at least 75% of it. And you were there in more supporting roles on the actual business side. And then you took the majority of the family. And we had very young babies at that time. And you had at least 75% of that. And I was the cheerleader towards you. And we were very successful in that way. And there was mutual respect for the role and for each other doing it. So I think this is a great way to go. But it's not the only way to go. So now we are not doing that role any longer. We are not the quarterback cheerleader role. Now we are the co-captains, right? We have our offensive team and our defensive team, and we are both captains running our own plays and having our own crews behind us. And that I want to talk about next. I think that is another fantastic way to succeed.
So in this role, I think it's both of the individuals, the co-captains, have their own role financially, right? They're bringing in income, but then they also have a role within the family. And so we have our own team that we are running. So if y'all don't know, we own Platinum Resort Assisted Living in Georgetown, Texas. And so I am pretty much predominantly the operator of that business. And so that is my role financially. So, and then Brett, he is overseeing the operations of our partnership company that we have, where we help and support individuals and entrepreneurs who want to start their own assisted living or memory care mansion. And so he oversees that. And we also have, properties that Brett oversees as well. So we have our own roles within the income, within the financial aspects of our family. But then as far as our family, we also kind of divvy that up. It's kind of an unspoken. We don't really talk about, hey, this is your role. You take the trash out. I do the dishes. Like, it's kind of an unspoken thing that if there's something that needs to get done within the home, one of us just does it. I don't know. It's not like a fight. It's not like a, hey, this is your thing you need to do. It's, if I see the trash cans you need to take them out, I take them out. And if you see they need to be taken in, you take them in. Like, it's not like this like nagging thing that we have that we hold over each other's head. It's just that, hey, we are on the same team within the family life, and we just, whatever needs to get done, we just get it done, and we do it with a joyful spirit. It's not like we have a contempt against the other person because they didn't do this certain role. So I think that having that is super helpful with just shutting your mouth if you're frustrated about doing it and just do it. Like, it's part of being a family. We even teach our kids this. Like, don't complain about something not being fair. Like, life is not fair. That's just how life is. And so even if you took the trash out and you took them in, who cares? It needed to get done. The other person was in a meeting. The other person had something to do. And so it gets done when it needs to get done.
For sure does. I really like the way we have this set up now with the co-captains. So, because in this context, you are running your business, I'm running my business, and really together they're both our businesses, but you are taking the lead on one and me on the other. And it allows for both of us to grow, where I think before, honestly, in the financial or in the business sense, you were kind of held back from the difficulties and the challenges of the business because I was handling all the problems, and it prevented you from growing. So I've seen so much growth in you in the last few years as you have kind of taken on this role, and now you are leading your own team and growing that company. I think that that is another fantastic way to go. And the other thing that I think is super interesting about this perspective is, since now we are not involved in the same business, so to speak, I don't know all the problems that are happening at Platinum that you're solving, and vice versa with our training company. So when we say at the end of the day, hey, babe, how was your day? It's not just a question that I already know the answer to, right? Like, I actually don't know, like, how was your day? What's going on? Oh my gosh, you had that happen? Like, so interesting. Tell me about it, right? Like, there is legitimacy of mystery because I don't know, I'm not involved in all these things that if we were working together when we were, like, I already know the answer to that question. Like, I'm just asking because of just to ask, right? Like, now there's more separation between us during the work time kind of stuff. And I think that's really healthy for a relationship to have that separate time. And again, this may only be applicable to husband and wife that actually work together as business owners and things like that. But in this perspective, even if you have one company and you separated it and like, hey, you're running this part of it and I'm running this part of it, I think this is a really healthy way to go, because it puts the growth and the responsibility of one side of the organization on one person and gives them that confidence to run with it. Whereas before, when we were the quarterback and the cheerleader, really everything was falling on the one person, and then you were getting delegated, hey, here are the tasks that can you do this, right? Like, here's the lower level tasks. I'm going to handle these bigger issues and opportunities over here. And so it allows for a different relationship. And at least in the stage of life that we're in, it's working very well for us to be the co-captains. And then we take that mentality towards the family as well. And like you said, it's less spoken, but there are certain things that I usually do, and there's certain things that you usually do regarding the house and regarding the kids and all that kind of stuff. So for us, identifying these two different roles, right? It's not like we knew we were in them when we were doing it. And so I think hearing this, I mean, I heard it on another podcast, and I'm like, oh, we're doing it. I give them different names. I'm like, hey, it's more similar to this for us. So if you can see yourself in either of these opportunities or roles, then if you can identify it and have this conversation with your spouse, it makes the expectations, it makes the role, if you can name it and be like, hey, we are the cheerleader or we're the co-captain, like it gives it a lot more context, and then you have a better understanding. You can have this conversation with your spouse. So I would encourage you too, if you are similar in one of these two positions, to have this conversation with your spouse. Share this episode with them, have them, listen to this with you, and really get clarity on how are we supporting each other, how are we encouraging each other, how are we pushing towards our financial and our family goals.
Well, thanks for joining us on another episode of The Donkey and the Bee. We have one ask and one ask only for this show. We do not run any ads. We don't sell anything. I think that's super obnoxious when you're trying to listen to a podcast and there's always this ad that comes in every 5 minutes. No, we hate that. We are never going to do that. So the one ask we have is for you to just share this podcast. If there's something that really hit home for you and you think, oh, hey, my significant other, or hey, my person that I work with, or hey, even my son or daughter, this would really hit home with them, share it. That's the one thing we ask, is just to hit that share button and share it with whoever you think would really need to hear this. We will see you on the next one now.